You're listening to the Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast.
What an amazing word. Well, hey there. Welcome back. Today the podcast centers around one word, potential. When I say it like that, it's a pretty innocuous and harmless sounding word, isn't it? Potential. There's a terrifying side to that. I mean, if I use it in a sentence, it changes quite a bit. I don't think you're living up to your full potential. You know, potentially I could see that working. You know, things like that. And the definition of it is essentially having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future. That in and of itself is very vague, which is why the word sounds vague when you say it by itself. The positive spin is you can say someone has a great potential. It means that they can become something much greater, meaning something positive, better, expanded, grand, than they are now. So if they are someone who is, let's say, just starting out as a pilot, if they have great potential as a pilot, they could go to be a fighter pilot or to be a commercial airline pilot or something on a grand scale in some way that measures that usefulness, that measures their potential. Okay, so far pretty harmless, right? Harmless, yet still very useful. But then there's the potential for harm, or potentially this could get out of hand. And again, potential is just the thing that leads us to the other thing. It's just the doorway. It's just the messenger, so don't shoot it, right? But it is a word that's used in both cases. It's definitely used as a word to describe something very positive that could happen to something or someone, a grand thing they can grow into. We hear that all the time with jobs and things like that I just mentioned. But it's also used on the flip side. Absolutely catastrophic events are announced with the word potential. This freak winter weather has the potential to cripple traffic and bring down power lines. This little problem that a politician is having has the potential to get him completely kicked out of office. This little PR gaffe that happened in a giant company has enough to tank their sales and make their stocks crash. Potential. A powerful word that's in and of itself not powerful. All right, did I beat that up enough? Does that make sense? So why do we want to talk about it today? Well, because it, like so many other words, as I said, is kind of the messenger. It's the doorway. It's the path that leads you to the stuff, that leads you to the thing that has such a great impact, or at least potentially. Oh, see what I did there? So here's where it applies to you. If a word exists that can be used in a sentence like that, so universally, for good and for bad, for failure and success, it's describing a thing that might be a little hard to define because it is so universal. So think about that. The potential for a winter storm to turn into something that could cripple a small city for a week. That same word is used to say that your potential here in this company is unlimited. That's the same word. And you can say, well, Mark, it's just a modifier, big deal. Like very. Well, I'd give it some respect. It's a bit better than very. But what I'm saying is, if a word can define a concept, and if a word can define reality, then let's focus on the reality that it's defining. And the reality is how one thing can turn into something big in both directions. So potential is powerful and also terrifying. And now we're getting somewhere, because now we're getting to you. Now we're getting to why you don't want to do that thing. What? No, stay with me. The reason you don't want to do a thing, or the reason that you have a block, as so many coaches say, and that really annoys me, the reason that you have this block or this thing the reason you're stuck is potential. And I'll bet you no one has ever said it that way. They just call it fear. They just call it fear that's attached to something. We have to get you unstuck. We have to get you around this thing that's in the way of you. The thing that's in the way is potential, and your concept of potential, and your understanding of the concept of potential, and your understanding of the reality that's being described by that one tiny little innocuous word called potential. The person is afraid of doing something because of what potentially could happen. Well, sure, it seems like it's safe, but potentially it could be very dangerous. I could jump out of a plane. A lot of people do. It's great. But potentially that could kill me. Right? I could speak in front of a bunch of people, but potentially I would be so embarrassed that it would be terrible. Potentially there'd be people heckling me, blah, blah, blah. I personally don't care about that. Bring it on. But most people of the right mind do feel that way. And it's because of the P word, because of potential. Are you giving it any respect yet? You should. So if you want a little homework, take inventory on directions in your life that you've thought of going, or things you are trying to do that you're just stalled on. Things that you want to do, but you're not doing it, right? I bet most of them, if not all of them, are due to potential. Are you tired of that word? But it's true. You're thinking about the potential of what can happen. You see that little funnel, that little tiny funnel that turns a tiny thing into a giant thing called potential? That's what we're talking about here. You don't want to pursue X because in the back of your mind, you know, potentially it could be a disaster like the snowstorm. Potentially it could do something terrible like what happens to the PR people in the company that's now tanking. But on the surface, all you and your coach and everyone else is focused on is the potential of how great it can become. Funny how that works. Everyone focuses out loud on the positive, while your brain, it's like, no, it could be really bad. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Because it's focusing on the negative of the potential. It's kind of a yin and yang word, isn't it? So, now that I've said this word 100,000 times, and you hate this word and you hate me for saying it, that's fine. I knew there was a potential for you to not like it. Oh, wah, wah. But seriously, so I've already raised your awareness on it, as I do. That's my thing. So now you have your awareness raised of what potential is and what it does and doesn't do, and the black and white of it, the good and the bad of it. So I want you to think about things in your life, directions you're going, and how potential has always played a part in you avoiding it or moving towards it. And let me ask you this at a later date that you can answer. Has the potential for something going bad and being catastrophic ever motivated you to do it? Or is it always the potential for it being great? And understand that my yin and yang description is actually misleading, because the yin and yang is actually could be very almost one-sided. Like something could have very little potential to do anything good for you, but have great potential to do harm. And conflicts are like that. If you have a conflict with someone and you want to speak your mind to someone, you can go through it 1,000,000 times in the shower. But in real life, what are you really going to gain? Like in certain cases, you're not going to gain anything. It doesn't matter. It's going to fall on deaf ears. And all you're doing is stirring yourself up with this massive potential for failure. So it's not worth it. You see that? So that's where the potential for something to go bad would deter you from having this little conversation that really nothing's going to come of it. So think about that. Think about things in your life that you've moved towards because the potential was grand, but perhaps at the same time, the potential for failure was great as well. And the failure could be something really horrible because, you could fail in the dark and no one's going to see, right? Take it from someone who self-motivated himself to write these books. I mean, I could have failed. And people would eventually say, I thought you were writing that book. What's going on with that? But, sometimes failure's in the dark. Sometimes success is in the dark too. So just think about that. All right? Let me know, as always. And thank you so much for potentially enjoying this. Take care. Hey there, thanks for listening. I always enjoy your feedback. The prequel to The Sword and the Sunflower duet, called Upside Down, is now available. The Sword and the Sunflower is available as Kindle, paperback, and audiobook, with the other two, Amira and Upside Down, being available as Kindle and paperback. Well, actually, all three books are now available in hardcover.